But just wanted to say, Roger, always great to see you, my friend.
To be back from vacation, Alex. I'm tan, rested, and ready, and very excited about the War Room, which I think is going to be a real blockbuster in terms of fighting back against the mainstream media and their constant war of lies and disinformation.
And I don't want to give people a false sense we're winning, because the storm came in and discredited them and showed unity, but they're going to launch back with false flags. Mike and I really believe something Oklahoma City level or worse. You can see it. They got all these TV shows, and I'm not bringing this up because it's about me. I've never even played the promos for these shows. All these HBO and Comedy Central shows where they admit this character's Alex Jones. Then they have the character say horrible things I never said. This shows they've got something big planned this fall. You can see the military buildup, information warfare-wise. Roger, what do you think's coming? And plus, I know you live in Florida part of the year. Are you ready for Irma, a first Category 6 in history?
Well, Alex, I have evacuated Florida, taken my wife, my dogs, my cats, my children, my grandchildren, and we have decamped to Washington, D.C., probably go to New York at the end of the week. Governor Rick Scott has called a state of emergency for the entire state, forced me to cancel a book signing I had with the great Milo that was planned for this Saturday. That's been rescheduled till October 15th. So we're as ready as we can be. We batten down the hatches in Florida. What surprises me about the left is the fact that they just have no sense of shame. Last night, watching the former director of intelligence, James Clapper, on CNN with Anderson Cooper. Now, Clapper is a man who got caught red-handed lying about the government's NSA metadata collection system. He insisted under oath before the Congress that there was no such program, until, of course, the disclosures of Edward Snowden proved that he was a liar. And he was forced to backtrack in the face of a possible perjury charge. So the question you have to ask yourself is, why would CNN interview such a person? Why would anything they say be held to be true or credible? It's amazing how the left just has no sense of shame. They're so busy attacking Melania Trump's shoes that they don't pay attention to the record of distortion of a man like Clapper.
And by the way, Roger, that's the reason I held over, and I'm glad you reminded me why I decided to hang into your hour here. And that's because look at how CNN has been forced to admit that they basically had most of their Russian investigation killed now because they got caught plagiarizing, making stuff up, talking to witnesses that never told them the things. That's in The Hill, that's in Politico, that's in Daily Caller today. So this whole thing's unraveling. And again, this on the heels of last week, as you mentioned, in congressional testimony, it's now admitted that Comey cleared the Clintons and even told them and wrote them a letter before he ever interviewed them, showing it was a complete and total, absolute, 100% fraud, caught red-handed. The guy is his own leaker committing crimes, lying and saying he didn't, have notes, then admitting he did. That's lying to Congress. Then saying, well, I don't have to give it to him under national security to the Attorney General. He did. I mean, it's just legions of fraud. These people, though, keep operating like they're invincible. Sessions has gotten a little stronger on it, but I agree with the president. Where is Sessions? These people are ridiculous criminals. Mueller is a fraud and an absolute sycophantic joke. Comey is a moron, idiot criminal. Tarmac meeting criminal.
I couldn't agree with you more, Alex. I don't understand why Attorney General Sessions has not convened a grand jury and brought an indictment against James Comey for obstruction of justice. It's as clear as the nose on my face, and that's pretty prominent. In this case, we go all the way back to the FISA court declarations in November that prove without dispute that the entire front line of the NSA under Obama, Clapper, Rogers, Brennan, et al., Rice, were illegally surveilling, spying on as many as 30,000 Americans. That list would include Donald Trump, Roger Stone, Melania Trump, Ivanka Trump, Paul Manafort. The list goes on and on. This is wholesale spying, use of government authority and assets for spying for political purposes. It's a classic criminal indictment. So, where is Sessions? Is he asleep?
Let me ask Cernovich this question, and then you, and then I'm going to eject you because you're going to be back on the War Room later today as well. It kicks off in about 45 minutes at Infowars.com/show and Newswars.com/show. Mike Cernovich, where do you think the Russian thing's going? Because the word is it's sputtered out, it's over, there is no evidence, it's made up. Okay, some lawyer asked about a real estate deal. They have hundreds of them going at any one time. And, okay, someone's looking for dirt on Hillary. Meanwhile, Hillary's up to her eyeballs in Russian collusion.
Yeah, I've actually got stuff I probably can't share right now, but based on the people that I know received subpoenas recently, I know that they have nothing on Russia because what they're looking at is so delusional and so far-fetched. Mueller is America's #1 conspiracy theorist now because this whole Russia stuff, based on what they're looking at, based on high-level sources, it's so off the wall, it's so bizarre. It would be like they went to the coffee shop where you have coffee and they go in and they start interviewing people because you're there every day. And has anybody ever seen?
Oh yeah, that's in the news where they're tell folks about the harassment. They're contacting not just all the folks that ever lived in the Trump Towers. They're going after all those other business contacts. Yeah,
they found out all the people who were members of the Trump Golf Club. And they've created a database, USA Today did this, they've created a database of people who their sole crime is that they were a member of Trump's golf club. And, of course, as we know...
This is stalking.
Yeah, it's stalking, harassment. They will use this to dox people. And then here's what they're going to say. Well, I mean, we haven't released the list yet, but now what they're doing is they're letting the loonies know, hey, you can go recreate this list on your own, wink, wink, nod, nod.
Sure, here's where they play baseball, the New York Times says, and then, oh, hashtag hunt Republicans. It's so clear how these wimps are trying to... When I call Mueller a criminal, he covered up for the Clintons, he covered up for the Bushes. The guy's a joke. Now he's going after Trump for nothing. Mike Cernovich, closing comments.
Yeah, I mean, Comey's a criminal. As we know, we need more people like Roger Stone in the White House. Jeff Sessions, I love the guy, but he's just out of touch. He's too worried about marijuana. We need him to focus on getting Antifa people thrown into prison where they belong, declaring them a RICO enterprise and using the RICO Act to break up Antifa, just like they broke up the mob. This has to be done. Sure. This has to be a priority.
Well, we're always honest with the audience. I'm going to skip this break so Roger has more time, and the 50 break as well. But the big question here is we don't want to just sit here and bash Trump, but on the Afghanistan thing, he went back on what he said his instincts were. But he also said he listened to the generals. He said he wanted to decriminalize marijuana. He's kind of letting Sessions run around, you know, with like Reefer Madness 2.0. This is crazy. He is saying WikiLeaks is horrible and criminal when that's who got him elected more than Matt Drudge or even Infowars or Roger Stone or you. I mean, let's just say Julian Assange. And the Patriots who aren't exposing our secrets are exposing criminal activity. And then now with some of the things he's doing, clearly he's a million times better than Hillary. We love him. He's so strong. He did what he said he'd do on DACA because what Obama was doing is criminal. He wants them to reform the program. But there are some signs, and Mike's saying there's some signs, and Bannon has said there's evidence that Trump is basically starting to capitulate to the Republican establishment. Is that really fair to say, Roger Stone? And I'm going to turn this over to you. Thank you.
Alex, I think to answer your question, more so in the realm of foreign policy than the realm of domestic policy. It's absolutely clear that the president is dedicated to building the wall. Pardon me. It's also absolutely clear that he is adamant about a 15% corporate tax rate for American businesses, big and small. In my opinion, this is the absolute cornerstone of the Trump revival. This is the cornerstone of the success of his presidency. It would buy him both time and capital to fix the country's other problems. So I think I give him an A+ on the area of domestic policy. He clearly is keeping his pledge in that area. Where I'm concerned is the growing influence of the generals, what I call the 7-day in May crowd, General Mattis, General McMaster, who has direct ties to George Soros, who worked for a think tank financed by Soros prior to his White House service, who's in the White House at the severance of Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, and who in no way is committed to the Trump doctrine abroad of avoiding international conflicts where our inherent national interest is not clear. So I give the president an A on domestic policy. At this point, I'm concerned after the Afghanistan announcements that the neocons who seem to have post-Flynn infiltrated the foreign policy apparatus of the Trump administration are beginning to show their muscle in that area. I think when we look back on it, we will see that the dismissal of Flynn is a seminal moment in terms of the neocons making a comeback in foreign policy. The other point that I guess I would make today that I think is topical is that I filed with the court in the District of Columbia my response to the lawsuit by Obama and his cohorts in which the president and his campaign and I were sued for allegedly colluding with the Russians to hack the email of the DNC and to give that information to WikiLeaks. We filed in the court yesterday, I think it's pretty well covered in the media today, making the point that they can't even prove that the DNC was hacked. Never mind that it was hacked by the Russians or that I had anything to do with it. This is a lawsuit that is being utilized for fundraising purposes. It's a fraud upon the court. They provide no evidence whatsoever of collusion with the Russians by myself or Donald Trump or his campaign. So we have moved to dismiss. We have also planned to pursue sanctions by the court against the long list of august, white shoe, left-wing lawyers who've had the bad judgment to append their name to this piece of crap. It's a harassment lawsuit. We broke this story right here at Infowars.com only several weeks ago. I'll be honest with you, Alex, and my Info Warriors, I wear it as a badge of honor. Being attacked by Barack Obama and the Clintons, that's a badge of honor. You've seen it in the case of Mike Cernovich. You've seen it in the case of Alex Jones. You've seen it in the case of my friend Jack, Jumpin' Jack Flash Posobiec. When they attack you, it means that you are effective. It means that you're getting under their skin, and it means that we're winning. And that is very specifically, I think, what bothers them. The other piece of very concerning news coming out of Washington is the word that Keith Schiller, longtime bodyguard and confidant of President Donald Trump, will be leaving the administration. Now, Keith Schiller is a man I've known for a number of years. He is a patriot. He is the man who sees Donald Trump last at night and first thing in the morning. He is the man who keeps one eye on the crowd and the other eye on the other bodyguards, including the Secret Service. He is a man who always has the best interests and confidentiality of Donald Trump at heart. And I fear that he is being squeezed out by General Kelly. I know, as of this morning, that Kelly has gone to the president and complained about Roger Stone. I haven't even warmed up on him yet, so I'm not sure what he's complaining about. But I do know this. Squeezing Keith Schiller out, a man who is protecting the president with his life, is an ominous sign. But the reason that they are moving Schiller out is the same reason they moved Steve Bannon and Anthony Scaramucci out. These men all had independent access to the President of the United States. They all had the ability to speak to the president at will. And that is what scares General Kelly so much. You see, he'd like to isolate the president. He'd like to completely control what the president reads, what he sees, who he meets with, who he talks to on the telephone. He'd like to control where the president goes and where he can't go. And that, in my opinion, completely misunderstands Donald J. Trump. I fear for the president's safety if a man like Keith Schiller is not in the White House at his side. I have no illusions, having written a book about the Kennedy assassination, about the flaws in our national security operation, including the U.S. Secret Service. I'm not saying that every Secret Service agent is not a patriotic American trying to do their job. The great majority, in fact, I would say virtually all of them are. I'm worried about corruption at the top of that agency, just as I worry about corruption at the top of the FBI, and I worry about corruption at the top of the CIA. I'm not trying to disparage the patriotism of the rank and file men and women who work for those agencies, who are merely trying to do their job and serve their country. But without Keith Schiller keeping a watchful eye on the president's back, in all honesty, I think the president is in grave, grave danger. The way the establishment works is first they try to defeat you. They can't do that. They try to discredit you. Then they try to co-opt you. If they cannot co-opt you, then they try to remove you. We saw this in the instance of President Richard Nixon. We saw it in the instance of President John F. Kennedy. And it is not beyond the realm of possibility in the instances of President Donald J. Trump. If he stands in the way of the war machine, if he stands in the way of the neocons who so desperately want war over Syria, then he poses a real obstacle to their money-making agenda, to their internationalist agenda. Donald Trump standing up for American sovereignty, for American exceptionalism, for American nationalism is a real chink in the game plan of the nationalists who had already decided that they were going to have a Jeb Bush versus Hillary Clinton election. Heads I win, tails you lose, policies identical, rhetorical flourishes strained to appear that there's some differences, but in truth, all selling us the same old globalist crap. Along comes Donald Trump, the preeminent outsider, controlled by no one, beholden to no special interest, owing no one for his election other than the American people. And now, having gotten rid of Reince Priebus, under whom absolute chaos ensued, well, perhaps the president likes the pace a little better and the organization a little better. But I can tell you that at the end of the day, I'm confident that he will chafe at the attempts by General Kelly to control him, to control his information flow particularly. In fact, we know that he has already chewed Kelly out, having read in Politico, where the general actually goes public and announces that he intends to try to isolate the president, announces that he intends to try to keep him entirely in the dark. So I think Kelly will ultimately go the way of those previously who have not understood that Donald Trump is his own man, that Donald Trump is a free spirit, that Donald Trump will not be managed, controlled, handled. And the more he reads about those attempts, the more likely his rebellion will be. Now, it'd probably be a very good time to also mention that we are not in a position where we have multi-million-dollar check writers like the Ford Foundation or the Rockefeller Foundation or George Soros financing our broadcasts here at Infowars.com. And that's why we need you to go to the Infowars.com store now, where we have an extraordinary special on select storable food for a very limited time. And if you use a special coupon code IRMA, and I suspect that this was also done for Harvey, you can get some of the very best storable food with a shelf life of almost 25 years to protect you and your family. There's a reason why FEMA reports that up to 395% increase in food prices that get triggered every time we have one of these natural disasters, like we have in my own home state of Florida upon us today. So you can't possibly know what is coming, but we can get ready for whatever may transpire. So please, folks, go to the Infowars.com store now and load up on these extraordinarily select storable foods. I can tell you, knowing Alex Jones and the people in Austin, that there's no product on the Infowars.com store site, that hasn't been vigorously pre-tested and doesn't have hundreds, in many cases thousands of testimonials as to the quality and efficiency and excellence of the products that they offer. So you help yourself, but you also help us here at InfoWars. We are the tip of the spear. We are the internet site that they're trying to block the president from reading. We are the internet site that they don't want the president to see. And that's a testimony to Alex Jones and the men and women at InfoWars. So please help us with your dollars. Go to the Infowars.com site. You'll not only be helping yourself, but you'll be helping the entire crew here at InfoWars continue the fight for free press, the First Amendment. Many thanks. I'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and I'm, as you can see, here with Jack Posobiec, who is going to be joining me at the on the War Room later today. Jack had some observations on DACA, which I think is the best place for us to begin. Jack, what is your assessment of the current political situation regarding DACA?
Roger, I think it's interesting the timing of when the DACA decision is going to come down to. So we're seeing now that because of the 6-month extension, which has been granted by the administration with Sessions and Trump to this, that we're now looking at an early 2018 decision from the Congress regarding an extension, regarding any legislation. So politically speaking, on the calendar, that's going to be right in all of the primaries coming up with Congress. We've already looked at this. Some people out there have launched what they're calling Revolution 18, a primary against the Never-Trumpers. And now this DACA issue, this issue of amnesty. And let's be clear that when we're talking about DACA, we're not talking about children. These are, on average, 26-year-old, the majority of them young adults. That now the Republicans in Congress, who are going to be facing a slew of primary challengers from Trump Republicans, from people who are on board with the America First agenda, are now going to have to put their name to paper on whether or not they are yes or no on this amnesty.
Well, my concern, though, has to do with the atmospherics of this issue. It's never good to be in a position in politics where you are depicted as being against children. Look, I'm an immigration hardliner. I think it is absolutely essential that the president build the wall. But at the same time, I think that this is an issue in which I would have sought some compromise. But let me go a step further. The president's message appears to be muddled. He made a number of comments prior to the announcement of the decision about approaching this with heart, with compassion, not being against the children. Then he appeared to just toss the ball to the Congress without comment, saying, well, it's their problem, let them solve it. And now today he's saying, well, if they don't solve it, I'll revisit it. What does that mean? I'm not sure what that means. So the administration's response to me seems to be muddled. And if we're going to fight out the 2018 elections, I'd rather fight it out on the basis of economic growth and the tax cut. To me, there's an issue that allows you to cross over to working class and blue collar Democrats, so-called Trump Democrats, and where you can take on the two-party duopoly, take on the leadership of the Republicans and the Democrats who stand in the way of your pro-growth, your dynamic pro-growth agenda. I'd much rather spend the election talking about that than talking about DACA.
What sort of things do you think could be on the table for the president? It seems like he's offering DACA to the Democrats. It seems like he may be offering this. What does he want in exchange? What are some of the things that he could ask for in exchange, not only from the Democrats, but of course the establishment Republicans?
Well, let's start with funding for the wall, which
right
they
there.
seem to be recalcitrant about. Here's an opportunity to get the funding on the wall in return for some kind of compromise on DACA. I believe you could probably put other restrictions on the program. Maybe he can even horse trade votes for his 15% tax rate for American businesses, big and small. Still, I believe the key to the president's reelection, the voters will give him enormous license if he can revitalize and re-energize the economy. Also in the news today, the trial of Senator Robert Menendez, senior Democrat.
Roger, that's kind of funny because I didn't see that in the news today. Was that in the news?
It's amazing.
I heard that it started.
Does not appear to be on the front page of the New York Times. Now, we did learn last week that among Senator Menendez's most active fundraisers are the Republican consultant Ana Navarro. Wait a minute. why would a Republican be out raising money for Senator Bob Menendez, who the government now tells us the evidence shows that his corruption scheme went on for over 20 years?
And this is someone, the great people at LifeZet, when actually dug deep into Ana Navarro's background, found that she had donated $20,000 to Democrats over the years. And she says, well, I donated to Bob Menendez a few times. Ana, you held actual fundraisers 3 times for Bob Menendez during the course of this corruption. So we've already saw that this corruption trial is ensnaring a lot of what they're calling sort of the old core, the old establishment Democrat Party, to include Harry Reid. Now we're seeing that it's going to ensnare a lot of people, to include Ana Navarro and other touch points on anyone who had also been donated to by this dirty, it's looking ophthalmologist, who, by the way, has already been convicted of fraud in Florida, Melgen. Now it looks like there are going to be more questions regarding who knew what about Menendez, who knew what, when did they know it, what was going on at these fundraisers, were these fundraisers held down in the Dominican Republic at this guy's resort place where they held a lot of this stuff, most of these completely unreported by Senator Menendez himself. But of course, you're not going to hear any of that today from the mainstream media. It's not going to be leading trending topics on Twitter or Facebook, or Google algorithms aren't going to be bringing it up very much. Instead, they're probably going to find an issue like, I don't know, Melania's stilettos or something like that.
Something vital. Now, it's interesting that the Menendez investigation has led us to learn a lot of things about Ana Navarro. When she wasn't busy giving to Bob Menendez, she was donating to Deborah Wasserman Schultz. It also appears that she was acting as an immigration attorney in her earlier years without ever being a member of the Florida bar. We know, based on a New York Times article, she was fired by the Jeb Bush administration for falsely claiming to be an attorney. If you look at her bio at the Kennedy School at Harvard, it's very curious. She says she got her undergrad from the University of Miami, and then it says in one sentence she later got her Juris Doctorate. Why wouldn't she mention the name of the school where she allegedly got it? Looks to me like more research needs to be done. I was really heartened to see my friend Michael Caputo challenge her on CNN on her question of her Republican credentials.
How did she respond to Mr. Caputo's line of questioning?
She went directly to Jeff Zucker and complained, as she always does, about anyone, whether it's Ed Martin, who's appeared here many times at Infowars.com, or Michael Caputo. If you get in her face, she will go to management and make sure that you're never booked again. She seems to be untouchable. The point, of course, is, as I revealed here at Infowars only days ago, Jeff Zucker's tenure at CNN is tenuous at best, that I believe that when the merger goes through in which AT&T acquires Time Warner and therefore CNN, Mr. Zucker will be shown the door. How far behind him will Ana Navarro be? That's the question.
Hopefully she'll be there carrying her bags alongside with him.
Now, the other question, of course, that many in Washington are focused on is what happens to Senator Menendez's seat in the U.S. Senate if he is convicted?
A lot of people are saying that Governor Chris Christie, who at one point was very close with the Trump administration, then kind of gotten the boot early on during the transition period, could sort of pull a Huey Long type move and actually appoint himself to the Senate seat rather than wait out his time in the governorship. A lot of people don't think that he stands a chance in other electoral politics at the national level, but this would give him the chance to at least finish out the Senate seat there.
There's a couple problems with that scenario. First of all, from a historical point of view, governors who have appointed themselves to vacancies in the U.S. Senate has never worked out. Governor Wendell Anderson of Minnesota tried this in the 80s, and it was an ignominious disaster. Chris Christie's approval rating right now is the lowest of any governor in New Jersey history, so his prospects to actually hold on to this seat would be difficult at best. My sources in New Jersey tell me that the nomination of Assemblyman John Bremick is far more likely than the self-appointment of Chris Christie to the U.S. Senate. But Christie is a political animal, and he does not appear to have any place to go. As you correctly point out, he is disaffected from the Trump administration, although he did manage to get one of his proteges appointed FBI director. It's another head scratcher why we would want to put another drug warrior neocon into that office. But he seems to be, Christie this is, a man without portfolio, a man with no place to go. And that may afford him an opportunity to see his way clear to appoint himself to the United States Senate. The timing is, of course, also crucial. We don't know when Menendez is likely to get convicted. We only know that he is likely to be convicted. I would point out that all of his appeals have been denied. And in those appeals, he essentially pretested his arguments of his defense, that his service to Dr. Melgum was merely constituent service, and that he can't be prosecuted for that.
However, the prosecutors, and we have to bring people up to speed on the case, I think, a little bit here, too, because, again, the mainstream media has been completely derelict in their duty in this to say that there's a sitting United States senator, regardless of party, it happens to be Democratic this time, but it should be reported on. This is someone who is, we're talking frequent flyer miles on a private jet, a resort-like mansion down in the Dominican Republic, and calling to make special sweetheart deals, not only for different pieces of legislation in the Senate, calls to Harry Reid that may have been made on behalf of Melgen and people that were associated with him from a financial standpoint, but also visas for different girlfriends of this doctor from all over the world coming in. We're told they're girlfriends. We don't know anything further. Now, at one point, Menendez and Melgen said, this is all just a bunch of fluff. It's merely partisan attacks, and we should not talk about it. The media tried to stick with that narrative for a few years. This thing has actually been going on for several years in the making, but after a few fits and starts, it's finally seeing its day in court. The prosecutors turned around and said, no, wait a minute, just because the media is writing that it is debunked, it has not been investigated, it has not been brought to trial, it has not seen a jury, so just because the media says that the headline is false, that does not mean the charge is false. And that's what we're going to find out in New Jersey here in the coming days.
Unfortunately, it's no longer available, but at one time there was a website where you could go and see the foreign girlfriend, a stunning Russian woman who Dr. Melgum wanted to keep in the country and who Senator Menendez went to bat for with the Immigration Service in an attempt to do so. Having seen her rather explicit pictures, I can fully understand Dr. Melgum's motivation in the matter.
Roger, you're a true investigative journalist.
What can I say? I just go where the facts lead me. The other stunning development only days ago was the U.S. government's failed attempt yet again, the second attempt to convict supporters of the Bundy family of ranchers in Las Vegas, Nevada, Clark County, Nevada, who are in an epic battle with the federal government. If you're not familiar with this story, quite simply, when these ranchers who were ranching on federally owned land through a permit with the Bureau of Land Management fell behind in their payments, well, the government launched a Waco-like assault on their property in an attempt to seize their cattle. Bundy, Cliven Bundy, the rancher, correctly went to the county sheriff and said this was theft. Now, the Bundy family and 18 of their supporters have been incarcerated for almost 19 months, none of them allowed pretrial release. And the judge in this matter, who has presided over the first mistrial, where the jurors failed to bring any verdict against the Bundys' supporters, has not allowed them to call any defense witnesses, has not allowed them to mount a First, Second, or Fourth Amendment defense, has not allowed them to choose their own attorneys. This is a kangaroo court, something you might see in the old Soviet Union. I have written about this extensively at Infowars.com. 5 reasons why President Donald Trump should pardon the Bundys. This is an issue that we're going to be covering quite a bit more here at Infowars.com. We have launched a petition in which we hope to amass 1 million signatures to have presented to the president, calling on him to review this case. But Jack, the most disappointing thing to me was when Attorney General Jeff Sessions visited Las Vegas, the highest law enforcement officer in the U.S. government, and he commended the prosecution, thus publicly tainting a trial in violation of his ethical obligations and the law. You may remember, actually before your time, when President Richard Nixon, in the middle of Charles Manson's trial for mass murder, said, well, Manson is guilty, everyone knows it. By the way, Manson was guilty, and everybody did know it. But the left went insane, the ACLU, they went crazy. You've tainted their trial, you violated Charles Manson's civil liberties. Today we see no such outcry regarding Cliven Bundy and his supporters.
It almost seems, Roger, that this is almost part of a trend that we saw during Obama's Department of Justice, the politicization of federal law enforcement in the United States, which trickled down to the FBI under Comey, but was continued under Eric Holder, as well as Loretta Lynch herself. We saw it in the prosecution and wrongful conviction of Joe Arpaio simply for doing his job and upholding the law, being refused a jury, the judge ruling in the opposite of the way that every single one of the witnesses testified at the trial. So is this another situation where now the Trump administration has to deal with the politicization of the DOJ, and where Sessions finds himself having to sort of either, I don't know if he's not willing to it or if he's waiting or what exactly the situation is, but it seems like there's a lot of messes that started at DOJ under Holder and Lynch, and that Sessions seems to be focused on other things rather than cleaning it up.
I think that's exactly right, Jack, and you're right to bring the example of the prosecution of Sheriff Joe Arpaio. They bring the prosecution against Arpaio under the wrong statute to ensure that he can't get a jury trial, that his fate is entirely in the hands of an Obama-appointed judge. They communicate illegally with the judge during the trial. The Justice Department monitors Arpaio's communications with his attorneys during the trial. This was a political hit job. This was entirely a political prosecution. In all honesty, I think enormous credit goes to Alex Jones and the folks at InfoWars for the fact that this got to the president's attention, and the president did the right thing by pardoning Sheriff Joe. So it shows that justice can be done, and we can only hope that the same justice we have seen in the case of Sheriff Joe Arpaio will be seen in the case of the Bundy ranchers, the Bundy family, and their supporters. Let me stress, 18 men are held in shackles in a dank, filthy Nevada jail. None of them have prior criminal records, but all have been denied pretrial release by the heavy-handed federal judge who was handpicked by Senator Harry Reid. Why? Because Senator Harry Reid wanted the land that the Bundys were ranching for a solar energy project. You can read about this at a piece I have now at Infowars.com. But that's the backstory about why these brave Americans have fought to maintain their rights against the oppressive jackboot of the Bureau of Land Management. By the way, when did the BLM get their own army? The founding fathers weren't even sure that the federal government should have an army. But the BLM has their own strike force to force ranchers to pay their payments. This is yet another outrage of the federal government.
And so we saw this a lot with the Obama administration, and now the left is still picking up on it, the politicization of law enforcement. So now, whenever the president tries to undo something like that, such as he did with Joe Arpaio, and now he's looking at trying to undo the unconstitutional way, and we can all at least agree on the DACA decision, the executive order passed by Obama by executive fiat from the Oval Office was clearly unconstitutional to go against the wishes of Congress as the representatives of the people. And we're breaking this down to this is like Civics 101 lesson that we have to give, because Barack Obama twisted everything around. And now the left is trying to say, you are disobeying the rule of law by actually following the constitutional law of the land because of the unjudicial, the prejudicial, and unlawful actions by so much of federal law enforcement under the Obama era. Now we're seeing this twist around to say, with the president basically going to say, well, I simply want Congress to come up with legislation on DACA. I want them to come up with legislation, and we can say yes or no, we can have that debate. But the left is coming around and saying, we don't want debate. We want our dictatorship back that they had under Obama. They just don't like it when the president says, well, no, we want to go back to the constitutional form of government. And yet they call Trump a dictator and compare him to Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin.
You know, Jack, one of the most effective things I've seen this week was Newsmax publisher Chris Ruddy appeared on the Don Lemon show on CNN. And it was a performance that was, in my opinion, absolutely masterful. Ruddy gave no quarter whatsoever. He got right back into Lemon's face. And every time Lemon misrepresented the truth or launched an attack on President Donald Trump, almost all of it self-centered. Lemon actually said at one point, well, a lot of people here at CNN criticize the president, but the president seems to be obsessed with me, in essence saying it's because he's black. Well, the president doesn't give two thoughts about what Don Lemon thinks or what he has to say. And to his credit, publisher Ruddy got right back into his face and said it. Then Lemon went into a harangue about how low the president's poll ratings are. At that point, Ruddy pointed out that his poll ratings were about the same as President Barack Obama in this same period. So, my hat's off to Chris Ruddy, an extraordinarily effective performance beating back fake news at CNN. Jack, what else was notable this week that you think the info warriors need to know about?
On that same piece, we're now actually starting to see a crack in the mantle of the fake news, where the New York Times just yesterday posted an entire story, an investigation they did of CNN's fake news, their coverage that they had to eventually retract of the Trump-Russia situation, a story they wrote where Anthony Scaramucci had been tied to this Russian investment bank. The New York Times completely, eviscerated CNN's complete lack of judgment, complete lack of oversight, using sources that didn't give them confirmed information, not confirming it, going back and forth on these things, but then the editorial decisions made by Jeff Zucker to hit print on that story, even when at one point their legal department at CNN said, we still have questions about this story, and Zucker goes and pushes forward with it because the Russia-Trump story had to lead CNN regardless of what was going on. We saw this same narrative in the Project Veritas case, and now the fact that the New York Times, of all places, the failing, the Carlos Slim-to-own New York Times, is even turning their crosshairs, rhetorically speaking, on CNN. It really goes to show how bad and how forceful their fake news is going.
There is nothing better than when the left turns on each other. Before we leave you today, I want to remind you one more time to please go to the Infowars.com store. My favorite product is the Trump-Pence 2020 t-shirt. But there's an entire range of First Amendment-oriented t-shirts there at the website that can not only enhance your ability to politically network and to reach and meet like-minded patriots, but at the same time, they help us here at Infowars.com finance our efforts to protect the First Amendment and free speech and to bring you the truth about what's really happening in Washington, inside the Trump administration, and in the Congress, with people like Mike Cernovich and Jack Posobiec Alex Jones, myself, we have extraordinary sources inside this administration, and we'll tell you the things that CNN and CBS and ABC will not. So whether you go for the storage foods that at this time of crisis in Florida and Texas are absolutely crucial, or whether you're going for one of these great iconic T-shirts like the Trump rape T-shirt or the Hillary for Prison 2017 T-shirt, or whether you're going to any of the other specials at Infowars.com at the store, you can help the fight for freedom. Please don't forget, folks, we need your help. We don't have George Soros writing us big checks. God bless you for being here, and victory or death.